Hello, everyone. Good morning, and a warm welcome from me, James Wilmot, to this next edition in Forum Europe's Future of Transport conference, now in its sixth year, where we focus on, as the title suggests, the intersection of technology and digital and the transport sector. This last edition, the last edition, I should say, of this event was in fact the last event that we held in person way back in March 2020, and it seems a long time ago. So we've in fact almost come full circle. And in that time, we've organised over 150 virtual conferences. And not for the first time, I would like to pay tribute to my colleagues at Forum Europe for their tireless work in continuing to deliver high quality debates in this still relatively new environment. And to our partners and sponsors for this event, namely Qualcomm, Intel, Might, and Huawei, details of which you can find on the platform, who continue to support what we're trying to do, and of course to you, our participants, without whom none of this would be possible. So again, thank you for your support and for being with us today. Very briefly, before we get started, I do want to point you in the direction of a few agenda and virtual tool items. So the first thing to say is that we're currently in the stage area of the platform. And you should see on the right-hand side of your screen the chat area. And this is where you can post your comments and your questions throughout the day. And our moderators will do their very best to feed these questions into the discussion as they come in. Secondly, you will also notice the People tab on the right-hand side, and this is where you can contact your fellow participants and, using some of the features on the platform, invite them to one-to-one video calls or simply use the private chat function. And you can also set up scheduled meetings. So alongside the networking tool on the left of your screen, which is a little bit more spontaneous, I would really encourage you between the sessions to try out some of the functionality that's available to you. Finally, if you need any support across the day, we'll be very active in the chat, and you can find most of the information that you might require in the reception area of the platform. But as I say, do reach out to us if you need anything at all. And finally, the hashtag for the event is Future Transport EU, so do get involved on Twitter. We've got loads of great content for you today, including showcase sessions where we'll deep dive on a variety of issues, and again, the reception areas where you'll be able to view the agenda and what's up next. So with that, I'll hand over to Forum Europe's chairman, Paul Adamson, who will moderate this opening keynote session. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and may I add also from me a warm welcome to everybody, all 500 plus of you who registered for this conference. To say that 2020 was a challenging year for the transport sector across Europe is something of an understatement. The pandemic has impacted the rollout of infrastructure projects, while operators and manufacturers experience significant impacts on revenues. And of course, the economic slowdown will further complicate the demand and supply of transport and mobility services. But the European Commission's ambitious regulatory work continues with the updated sustainable and smart mobility strategy announced in December last year, alongside the broader Green Deal project, European Green Deal project, of course, which is one of the flagship policies of the von der Leyen Commission. This conference, again, in its sixth year, gathers stakeholders to discuss and debate the critical pillars of EU transport policy and explore digital innovation, connectivity, safety, and how the transport sector fits within the EU's vision for an economy that is both green and digital. The key themes to be addressed in the course of the day: the EU strategy on sustainable and smart mobility, digital innovation in modernizing transport infrastructure safety, the regulatory revision of the Trans-European Transport Network, and the directive on intelligent transport systems. But we're going to start with three keynote presentations by senior policymakers. And first of all, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Dieter Juhl-Jürgensen, the Director General of DG ENER, I think that's DG Energy at the European Commission. And without further ado, over to you, Dieter, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much to all of you for joining this conference. It's a real pleasure to be invited to speak at this Future of Transport conference. Energy and transport are very closely interrelated. The different means of transport all require energy, essentially, whether it's your bike, your legs, an e-trottinette, your car, a truck, trains, planes and automobiles, a scooter. All of these has its own specificities, but they all require energy, from just a good hearty breakfast for your legs or your bike to the fuel that goes into the other types of transport. And the fact is that transport, all these different means of transport together, take up 1/3 of the total final energy that we are consuming in the European Union. And that comes with a very significant carbon footprint. So transport is responsible for about 1/4 of our greenhouse gas emissions in the European Union. That means that to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and to lower our carbon emissions by 55% in 2030, we need to reduce the transport-related emissions very significantly. They need to be reduced by 90%, as set out in the European Green Deal that was presented about a year ago. In fact, transport is the only sector where emissions are on the rise. And so the transformation in the transport sector is essential. And it has to cover all the different modes and types of transport. It will require bold steps, it will require innovation, and it will require engagement of the entire sector. And so today's talk, today's conversation, today's conference is an important one. From car manufacturing, fuel production, supply chains, and the extraction of raw materials, the management of transport fleets, the energy aggregation, all of these parts of the transport sector really play a critical role towards the goal of decarbonization. And I would like to start with what are the difficult to abate sectors, aviation and maritime, which also represent a significant share of energy consumption and of carbon emissions. Zero emission technologies are not yet commercially available in these sectors, but there are very promising demonstration projects that show that alternative renewable fuel solutions do exist in these sectors. And individual companies, shipping companies, airline companies have started, or airline manufacturers rather, have started looking to these solutions and are taking bold steps in terms of their forward planning. Hydrogen and hydrogen-based synthetic fuels are good examples. Methanol and ammonia in particular can help these sectors to decarbonize to quite a significant extent. And in the European Union, the Renewable Energy Directive provides clear and comprehensive criteria on the sustainability of such fuels, and also, of course, for biofuels, which have been in use for quite a long time. So these synthetic fuels and biofuels will continue to contribute to emission reductions, but of course, we need to make sure that biofuels, bioenergy in particular, is also genuinely sustainable. Road transport is where electrification is simpler and the most suitable path towards decarbonization. There are some discussions about the added needs, and we need to reflect on the significantly added needs of electricity generation and electricity supply to feed into electric mobility and the electric vehicle fleet. At the same time, it's important to keep in mind that transport electrification really also has the potential to bring a much greater gain in terms of energy efficiency. E-vehicles are a lot more energy efficient than combustion engine vehicles, and the overall ability of our energy system to absorb this renewable energy. Because electric vehicles can help not just absorb their own energy needs from renewables, but they can also help us, the energy system, absorb further renewable electricity for other needs and store that. That requires, of course, electric vehicles to be clearly and well integrated into the overall energy system. We launched last year a strategy on energy system integration, recognizing that an integrated energy system where the different parts speak to each other and make use of the opportunities for storage, generation, and loop back and circular electricity system is absolutely necessary to become climate neutral. And this requires a clear strategy, clear planning on how, in particular, energy and transport come together, and how we make sure and how we bring ourselves towards a digitized system in order to allow this process to happen. On the way to decarbonization, one of the most important contributions of the proliferation of electric vehicles will in fact be the flexibility and the balancing services that electric vehicles can offer to the overall electricity grid. Electric vehicles are parked and connected via smart chargers for long hours every day. That can be at the office or at home or other locations where we go. And their charging profile will be able to be managed in an intelligent way that matches the availability of renewable energy and off-peak loads in the grid. This way, energy sources like wind and solar are best absorbed and grid congestion can be avoided. So smart charging can help to limit the amount of investments into additional grid capacity and build more energy security and better system stability in our energy system, which is needed for the transformations. And this is not all. Electric vehicles can also collectively make very large amounts of storage capacity available to the grid while being parked and plugged. This, as I said, helps balance the grid, and it can even allow us to sell energy back to the grid at times of need through the vehicle to grid capabilities when the demand is high. This is, of course, a win-win solution. And as e-vehicle users, you would be remunerated for this service. So imagine at some point when you would have 40 million electric vehicles on the streets. That should be by 2030. And this is more and more realistic with the different policy changes we're seeing. That would mean that these 40 million electric vehicles would have sufficient storage capacity to hold nearly half of the electricity that the European Union would produce on an average daily basis, half the electricity. So if we manage to make available just a portion of that storage to the grid, the benefits will be very, very significant for our energy system and therefore for our economy. For an integrated energy system, we need transport electrification, and it's a game changer in this context. Our electricity directive and electricity regulation were adopted just a few years ago, and they provide a framework to support these developments of smart charging and bidirectional charging services. The good news here is that market and technology players are already offering these services. Aggregators are harnessing the storage capabilities of electric vehicle fleets and to offer these balancing services to the market. And we expect this trend to grow exponentially along with the proliferation of electric vehicles in the European transport system. And this is where we expect new digital technologies and information platforms to show their worth in an aim to support development of infrastructure to better fulfill our European Green Deal objectives. Our support for technology and digitalization is multifaceted. Under the Smart Cities and Communities policy context, we in the European Commission have supported the development and further rollout of sustainable green solutions for the urban environment. 116 cities are participating with around 400 million euro co-funds allocated from our Horizon 2020. Through the digital transformation of cities and communities, we aim to bring 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. And that's a process that has already started through 18 lighthouse projects. These projects focus on energy and transport in cities. They combine shared transport modes, electricity storage, both in electric vehicles, as I mentioned, but also in stationary systems, and integration of local renewable energy sources, and predictive charging algorithms for system optimization. They come with a huge benefit to the urban environment, to local communities, to businesses, consumers, and they offer a citizen-centric, a citizen-based digital solution for the citizens of these cities. In our current research and development framework under Horizon Europe, we have grouped energy and transport together through a cross-sector funding approach to make best use of the scope for integration of these sectors. It gives us more synergies, it allows more effective and integrated solution, and we expect the first calls for proposal to open already in April this year. Other resources are, of course, also pulled in to this transition under the European Green Deal and to the integration of energy and transport. We've got the European Regional and Development Fund, we've got the Cohesion Fund, we've got the Just Transition mechanism to mention some of the more important ones. And then, of course, we have the response to the pandemic, the mobilization of 750 billion euro through Next Generation EU and the recovery plan linked to that. Our objective is to boost economic growth and resilience, to create jobs, local jobs in particular, and to consolidate the European Union's global leadership and competitiveness against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic and the economic consequences that has had so far. European member states are drafting their recovery and resilience plans, national plans, in consultation with the Commission to make sure that the funds are allocated in an optimal way and corresponding to the requirements for a 37% focus on climate-related investments. For these climate-related investments, for us to meet these thresholds, it's clear that a large portion of the investments would have to go into energy and transport under future-proof green investments. I very much look forward to the discussion of this conference, and I wish you all every success in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dita. I realize you have to dash off to your next meeting, but you managed to pack in an awful lot of content in just over 10 minutes there. So thank you very much for setting the scene for us this morning. Have a good day. Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to welcome Henrik Hololai, Director General of DG Move, otherwise known as DG Transport of the European Commission, who has been extraordinarily loyal supporter of this conference since its inception all those years ago. And it wouldn't actually be a conference on transport without Henrik giving a keynote at the beginning. Unlike Dita, who had to disappear to our next meeting, Henrik said he will be able to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience or from me. So I urge those of you watching this, listening to Henrik, to think about dropping a line in the chat to ask him a question after his presentation. If no questions come forward, I promise you, Henrik, I will have 1 or 2 up my sleeve, that's for sure. Without further ado from me, Henrik, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul, for your most kind introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Paul, I would like to first also sincerely thank you for inviting me to address you. I would have so much more preferred to be with you in person, to address you where you are. I mean, when we would be all together. Well, now we are where we are, virtually. Perhaps as a symbol of the challenges we are facing now and we faced throughout last year. I think we all would like to see also that this all to end and we turn a new page, and hope sincerely and wholeheartedly that it will be happening sooner than later. However, with this crisis, there is also a silver lining, and we are now richer from an experience no other generation has had in a century. Are we happy about that? Probably not, but let us nevertheless build on that experience and act where we can do more, analyze what worked, what didn't, and focus on how we can change the world around us for being a better and more resilient place. We can do that. Last December, so about 2 months ago, the Commission presented the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. This document will guide our work for the next 4 years and beyond, laying the foundation of how the EU transport system can achieve its green and digital transformation and become more resilient for future crises. The conference comes at a very timely moment as we are looking at how to implement the 82 initiatives mentioned in the strategy, and the support from governments, businesses, and citizens will be absolutely crucial to this process. The success of the strategy would very much depend on a solid and well-functioning single market, where competition is the norm and bottlenecks, missing links, and unsubstantiated barriers are removed. We need a seamless single market for building the sustainable, resilient, and smart transport system. Otherwise, we will never get to achieve our goals. The pandemic has shown that in times of crisis, concerted, proportional, and timely responses at the EU level are necessary and very much expected. This is why the EU and its member states must do their utmost to preserve the integrity and enhance the functioning of the single European transport area. Unilateral and uncoordinated measures make it impossible for our transport and logistics systems to function correctly. Through the value chain, this presents very detrimental knock-on effects to our wider economy, including the competitiveness of our industrial sector and many other jobs across the EU. Transport will remain strategically important for the European economy during the recovery phase. We need to continue to work on the future of Europe's transport system so that it can recover quickly from the impact of the crisis and leap forward to a more sustainable, smarter, and resilient future. We need to set out much needed reforms, policies, and actions to support the sector. We need to build back better. And this is why our sustainable and smart mobility strategy, I think, is very timely and important, as As outlined in the European Green Deal, Europe needs to cut 90% of its emissions by 2050, delivered by a safe, sustainable, smart, competitive, resilient, accessible, and affordable transport system. To achieve these objectives, various milestones set a pathway for the investments we need to take. Just to name a few, by 2030, at least 30 million zero-emission cars will operate on EU roads and high-speed rail traffic will double. By 2050, nearly all cars, vans, buses, as well as new heavy-duty vehicles will be zero-emission. For transport to become sustainable, in practice, this will mean first, boosting the production and uptake of renewable and low-carbon fuels in transport, as well as supporting the replacement of existing fleets with cleaner vehicles. When we talk about the fuels, I think Dieter already did also many valuable remarks. Secondly, we also need to increase the number of passengers traveling by rail and commuting by public transport and by active modes. This also applies to freight. We need to shift a substantial amount of freight onto more sustainable transport modes, such as rail and inland waterways. Multimodality is the key there, as it binds better the different transport modes together. And there is always a need to deliver the last mile. Lastly, we need to implement the polluter pays and user pays principles without delaying transport modes, in particular through carbon pricing and infrastructure charging mechanisms. Sustainability is a huge challenge, which will require a strong improvement in the efficiency of the overall transport system. To achieve this, digitalization and overall innovation in transport is essential. This means, first, making connected and automated multimodal mobility a reality. For instance, by making it possible for passengers to buy tickets for multimodal journeys and freight to seamlessly switch between different transport modes. We like to talk about multimodality very much, but in reality, I think that only last years have started to bring a change. But we need now to accelerate that. And secondly, we also need to boost innovation and the use of data and artificial intelligence for smarter mobility. For instance, by fully supporting the deployment of drones and unmanned aircraft and further actions to build a European common mobility data space. Regarding resilience, transport has been one of the sectors hit hardest by the COVID pandemic. And many businesses in the sector continue to see immense operational and financial difficulties. Thus, we are first committing to reinforce the single market by reinforcing efforts to complete also the trans-European transport networks by 2030, increase investments, and support the modernization of fleets in all modes. And secondly, mobility should be fair and just for all. This means new mobility should be affordable and accessible in all regions for all passengers, including those with reduced mobility. And we need to make the sector more attractive for workers. And thirdly, we need to continue to step up transport safety and security across all modes, including by bringing death toll close to zero by 2050. And never forget, transport is very much about safety. Even though we don't always mention it, it's always the number one priority. As I mentioned also, a significant element of our sustainable and smart mobility strategy is the completion of the trans-European transport network, the TEN-T. And this is why we will present a proposal to revise the TEN-T regulation later this year. The TEN-T has been the cornerstone and front runner of a forward-looking European transport policy for decades already. The COVID crisis has certainly shown all of us the importance of well-coordinated transport infrastructure planning across borders. Now is a real opportunity to reassess whether we have everything in place and to identify what is needed to make our TEN-T future-proof. First, if we want to make transport greener, digital, and more resilient, we need the right infrastructure with the adequate standards in place. This might also mean reinforcing certain infrastructure standards and quality requirements to support the sustainable modal shift. During this European Year of Rail, we should particularly look at boosting our high-speed lines, which will provide better connections along the main corridors. But that's not enough. We also need to ask ourselves whether the single European rail area is really a reality, and if not, why? Secondly, we need to improve the role and functioning of the urban nodes in the TEN-T. Urban nodes become more and more important for the overall functioning of multimodal network. We need to improve last mile connections and to properly address problems of congestion and pollution, which are often concentrated, especially in urban nodes. They should all have sustainable urban mobility plans, and we believe that a lot of good things can be achieved, in particular through improving the current urban mobility policies and definitely build more sustainability and smarter solutions into these policies. Thirdly, our utmost objective is to complete the TEN-T by the given deadlines of 2030 and 2050. To this aim, we need to strengthen the governance instruments of the TEN-T and in particular of the core network corridors. This is just the first glimpse of our reflection, and I warmly invite you to take part in our open public consultation of the TEN-T impact assessment, which is open until 5th of May. New technologies have a major potential in improving transport safety, and intensive EU-supported research effort has been going on in this field. Technologies such as vehicle-to-infrastructure, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and drone technology combined with sensors will allow detecting poor quality infrastructure in real time, reducing risk, increasing safety. To give you an example, the use of robotized equipment, drones, or other semi-automated, remotely piloted solutions offer significant potential to reduce workers' exposure to live traffic and construction machines. The rapid development of digital innovation combined with satellite imagery will bring significant advances in the way that infrastructure elements are monitored, inspected, and maintained, building a digital twin of the physical infrastructure. To do that, we need data. For example, digital data on road infrastructures can greatly contribute to road safety. For example, by informing road users about applicable traffic rules or potential obstacles. Connected and automated mobility also strongly depends on digitalizing road infrastructure. Already today, road safety systems in the vehicle depend on infrastructure and regulatory data, and this will gradually become important as levels of vehicle autonomy are increasing and conventional and automated vehicles will actually be coexisting in the overall traffic system. We also need to make sure that nobody will be left behind, considering the different state of road infrastructure in member states and the different priorities and needs. The EU will support and catalyze investments in digital connectivity infrastructure of common interest through the Connecting Europe facility. One of our key tool to make connected and automated multimodal mobility a reality is the revision of the Intelligent Transport Systems Directive. Since its adoption in 2010, the directive has been driving force for the development of interoperable IT services across the EU, such as the EU-wide eCall and multimodal travel information services. However, digitalization in transport is moving fast, and intelligent transport systems are, of course, no exception. So we need to update the framework and set new priorities, together with all affected stakeholders, to make sure that it continues to contribute to the green and digital transition. This means putting much more emphasis on multimodal digital mobility services, enhanced traffic management, and cooperative connected and automated mobility. This also requires rethinking the interaction of our framework with other policies, in particular when it comes to vehicles, telecommunications, cybersecurity, liability, and the processing of flow of data. For this, we do not only need to rethink the technical aspects, but also how to strengthen the cooperation with our stakeholders. It's also a lot about changing the habits, changing the way we operate. Today, ITS is used in virtually every trip and transport operation. Now is the time to reflect if there are essential ITS data and services which should be available across the whole network, such as digital information on speed limits and other traffic regulations, incident detection, and information for persons with reduced mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, with our strategy, we have set our vision for the decades ahead to deliver on the Green Deal and a clear plan of action in relation to transport. It's a comprehensive and undoubtedly ambitious roadmap to put the EU on the path of creating sustainable smart and mobility system of the future with a well-functioning single market. Nevertheless, our efforts can only be successful if there is support from all levels. I'm counting on you and your partnership in developing and delivering this important agenda. Thank you once again, Paul, for inviting me to address you, and I'm sure that you are going to have an interesting day ahead.
Thank you very much, Henrik. That you have your work cut out. That's my first reaction to your very full intervention. Goodness me. There are a lot of questions coming in. The more you speak, the more questions are coming in. First question is from Eric Jonat, who's now a special advisor, transport mobility at the consulting firm FIPRA, but of course for many years ran the very influential automobile association, ASEA. His question is as follows, Henrik. Given the importance of getting more charging points available across all over Europe to accelerate the move towards electrification of vehicles, will the Commission agree on setting clear targets per member state on the number of public charging points to be created? We no longer need, says Eric, only general ambitions or goals, but measurable targets per country. So how do you react to that? You're on mute. Somebody unmute, Henrik. You are.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. There you are.
I'm sorry. No, I was just saying that maybe we can take one or two more questions and bundle them together.
That's very good advice to give me as moderator, Henry, because we have two more in a similar vein, in a broader vehicle area. A question from Hezam Nagash, who's a researcher at CMCCEIE, which I'm told is the European Institute on Economics and the Environment in Milan. And Hezam's question is, do you see a future for hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles as a part of a green, sustainable transportation sector? How much is the EU investing in hydrogen? And don't go away, a question from Annick Reuting from LEVA EU, which is the only trade association, says LEVA, in Europe to work exclusively for light electric vehicles. And Annick's question is the following, quoting seamless single market is essential. That's one of your lines, Henrik, in your speech. Nevertheless, says Annick, there are still huge legal bottlenecks for light electric vehicles, e-bikes, e-cargo bikes, e-scooters, etc., despite their huge potential for Green Deal objectives. The focus appears to be, says Annick, on electrifying cars and vans and buses. Can Mr. Hololai comment on that? There you are, sir.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. And thank you for the questions. I start with Eric, and very, very happy to hear from you, not see you. I mean, I look back of many years of very good cooperation that we had, always inspiring discussions and also interesting debates and disputes we have had in the past. Charging points, I mean, of electrification, this is absolutely essential. Let's talk about in a wider sense, the alternative fuels infrastructure. And of course, the electric charging is making a big part of it, at least in the short and medium term. But of course, we should also be open to other alternatives. And I already made the link to the second question. And definitely, hydrogen, green hydrogen, is part of that. I mean, and we should also, at the same time, while we develop the electrical infrastructure, charging points for electricity, we should also at the same time develop the hydrogen refueling options. I mean, for example, you know, in Brussels area, not even in Brussels, there is only one point where you can actually refuel a hydrogen car. So no wonder why you don't see too many of them in the circulation. And yes, I think we did a good start with the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive in the past, because it was the first time really. And there also we treated different alternatives in a similar manner. And I think they opened up a lot of possibilities. But that was 2013. Today is 2021. The needs are different. And we also have seen, and as you rightly say, that the member states did not deliver sufficiently. There were indicative targets. Then we have, the assessment of that, but we also lack the tools. And there are those member states who have done pretty well, and there are those member states which really are lagging behind. So that also means that when we talk about, let's say, a well-functioning single market also for electrical cars to circulate in the EU, there are the deficiencies. So yes, we currently the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive is being reviewed. The new proposal is coming later this year, within the next months, and hopefully before we go for summer break. And it is looking into those options. There is also the discussion currently, of course, ongoing with different stakeholders. But yes, my view is that we need to look at the legislative instrument. My view is also that what is the most efficient way to do it. And secondly, it is also about the very concrete targets for the member states that they need to deliver. At the same time, we want to develop also the 1 million charging points, which is part of the strategy. And of course, there will be also financing available through the Connecting Europe facility. But let's also not forget that there is relatively quite a lot of money actually available through the RRF and through the national reform plans, where we hope that this is also complemented, at least these issues are also discussed with the member states when they come with the plans. So yes, we need to step up the game here. If we are really talking about the change that needs to be brought, the infrastructure also needs to develop in a much faster pace. Now, coming to this about the hydrogen fuel cells. I have always, and I don't hide that, I have always been a proponent of hydrogen solutions. Even when hydrogen was not that sexy as it is today. Now everybody wants to jump on the wagon, everybody's talking about hydrogen and everybody is very positive about the potential of hydrogen solution, hydrogen fuel cells, vehicles, and so on. A couple of years ago, it wasn't the case. And now I'm really happy that the Commission has got a hydrogen strategy. We have also a very clear path forward. It's also high in the agenda of the Energy Commissioner, of the Internal Market Commissioner, and so on. So I believe that there is a lot of potential for hydrogen. Yes, I know it also needs to continue to evolve from the innovative point of view. There needs to be put also more research into it. There are still issues which are not entirely solved. But first, it has to be a green hydrogen, that's for sure. And secondly, of course, it's about the availability and so on. And I believe that there is a very big potential. Hydrogen, as we well know, is not only, we are talking about passenger cars or vans. I mean, clearly, it is a very serious solution for the heavy goods vehicles. It is also to replace certainly some in the rail sector also engines where the electrification doesn't make sense and where you can actually replace the diesel engines. But I think that the biggest potential for liquid hydrogen in the future is in aviation. I know very well that our flagship, our plane maker, aircraft manufacturer Airbus is very much eyeing upon that with the view of having 2035 a commercially viable hydrogen plane in the air for commercial use. And I do believe that this is definitely something where there is a lot of potential for the overall decarbonization of transport sector. But again, we can't afford not to have all the potential solutions, also the transitory solutions, which are currently there in the form of LNG, for example. And I think that we need to make sure that in the longer run, 2050, we have a decarbonized system for fueling transport. But I believe that there are different paths and different ways also to get there. Most important is that we develop it in sync also the way the market develops, and at the same time trying to push and accelerate the market. Now, legal bottlenecks on the different electrical solutions, I do agree. I do agree also what you said, that the different personal mobility devices which are already in use in the urban context in the cities are here to stay. I also believe that this kind of innovation should be welcomed by open arms if Europe wants to continue to be competitive in this front and attractive also in rolling out these solutions, and not in the past where you will find rather a way how not to do it than a way how to do it. And I do believe that, of course, we need to look also together with the stakeholders very seriously. And this is not only about us in DG Move; it is also concerning many other Commission services. But I think that a better delivering legal framework and safety framework, let's also not forget them, will be very much needed. And I do believe that in the urban context, you can also achieve the very good results, make a change of behavior as well. And that's why also we are looking into the urban mobility policy. We are updating that, and we of course reach out very much to the stakeholders also in the let's say urban and regional context, and that's also something that I was discussing today with my good colleague, Secretary General of the Committee of Regions, because I think that we can benefit a lot from many of the good insights that their members, cities, and local governments actually have, and can also advise us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henrik. We've run out of time, unfortunately. There's still some many questions. Maybe the people who ask questions, which I haven't been able to come on to, could drop you a line. You can maybe get your people to answer. So henrik.hollerleit@ec.europa.eu, and maybe one of his team will be able to answer questions in the chat that we haven't been able to address. Thank you very much indeed, Henrik, for your time, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye for now. We are actually now going to move on to the next panel. You will have seen that we haven't actually brought up yet Hugo Santos Mendes, the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Infrastructure. That's for the simple reason that the internet is down at the Ministry of Infrastructure in Lisbon, which is a certain irony there. So unfortunately, we have not been able to connect with Hugo. So hopefully on some other occasion we will do so. I hope that does not mean the Portuguese presidency of the EU is not impacted either. I hope the internet is working elsewhere in Portugal. So I now hand over to the people involved in the next session, which is our first panel, 5G in the Future of Connected Mobility, and hand over to Amit Nagpal. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Have a good day.